at Misano, but also he's looking to get himself onto the shop window for next season as well. Obviously, Barney's a really good situation for him. He's very happy there. But there's a bit of talk that he had meetings with BMW yesterday. If he's able to come away with 3 strong results here at Misano, that boosts his campaign a little bit more to get that factory BMW seat from Top Rack.
Andrea Locatelli announced his contract in the break between rounds with Yamaha. He signs on for another 2-year deal, which extends his relationship with the manufacturer that goes back to his 2020 Supersport title-winning campaign, of course. He was top Yamaha last season ahead of his 6-time world champion teammate, and this season has taken his first World SBK win. So a logical relationship to maintain, really, for both parties there, Andrea Locatelli and Yamaha.
Yeah, no surprise. It was always likely to be the case, obviously, for Locke. Talked to some other manufacturers, but Yamaha was always going to be the best option for him. He's got a bump in his wage for next year. He's going to be happy with that. And with the Yamaha package, there's always the chance of getting those good results as well. Sam Lowe's
6th in the standings, 42 points from the bronze medal position, but a podium contender throughout this season. Less than 0.2 of a second from the rostrum spots in both Sunday races in Most. 29 points at the Czech round for him, his best scoring World SBK weekend yet. But a complicated start here in Misano for Sam Lowe's.
Yeah, lack of mileage for Sam so far this weekend, but ended up 5th fastest on the combined times. He's done around about half the mileage of everyone else. He'll be fine for the Superpole session, but the race is going to be a bit different. He doesn't have that simulation under his belt.
Bad news for Alvaro Bautista, as his second spell with the Ducati factory team will conclude at the end of this season. The team have elected not to take up their option on Bautista for 2026, but he has already declared his intention to continue racing, and even at 40 years of age, he's not going to be short of suitors as a double world champion. Alvaro Bautista, big news this weekend within Ducati.
Yeah, it really is, but he's coming to a place where he won 5 out of the 6 races whenever he won those 2 World Championships, so always feels good here at Misano. Just needs to qualify. If he can qualify in the front 2 rows, the great. He's got the potential to be able to go with the leaders.
Andrea Iannone makes his return from injury sustained in a practice crash in Most that cost him the Czech round. 2 broken toes in his right foot. Managed 66 laps at the recent test here with a larger right boot and a modified brake setup. Admitted he was still feeling the pain. He said in advance of this weekend he feels about 80% fit. Of course, he's had another 2.5 weeks to recover since that Misano test. This is Jonathan Ray, and what a special venue Misano always is for him. This is his 3rd round back following his Phillip Island crash that cost him the first quarter of the campaign. Ray did look competitive in Most last time out, and he'll be confident here in Misano, where he has been strong in the past, as I said. 17 podiums, 8 of them wins, and particularly following a strong test with over 100 laps under his belt, he was feeling that he's beginning to maximise the potential of the R1.
Yeah, for Johnny, we saw yesterday, lost a lot of track running in FP1, but it was immediately at the same speed as Andrea Locatelli. I think in this Superpole session, obviously with the Q tyre, it's always important for Johnny to be able to see how that's going to play out. That's been the struggle. But if he's able to get close to Locatelli, that's going to be good for him, because the other Yamaha riders have been quick. Gardner was up in the top 5 yesterday morning. Damiagler up inside the top 10 in the afternoon session as well. Domi's got a new crew chief this weekend. It does look like it's helped him a little bit.
Previous poles in Misano, and it's Tom Sykes who holds the circuit record here with 7 in a row in visits between 2011 and 2018. Since then, 2 for Jonathan Ray, 2 for Alvaro Bautista. Last year it was Toprak Razgatlioglu by 0.2 of a second over Nicolo Bulliger. Razgatlioglu hasn't qualified off the front row here in the last 4 Emilia-Romagna rounds, and we were talking on air, off air before we came on, and Toprak Razgatlioglu perhaps starting as the favourite this morning.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Toprak can do. A lot of riders used the Q tyre this morning. It seems that Nicolo Bulliger didn't. He said the fastest time was only 0.003 of a second off the outright lap record as well. So I think himself and Toprak, they could even get down pretty close to the 131s, which would be a big chunk of lap time to take off for a new lap record. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. For everyone else, you've got to be in those 32s to be on the front 2 rows of the grid.
Xavi Vierque making his return from a fractured right foot sustained in a first bend incident in Most when he was caught up in the Jonathan Ray and Alvaro Bautista incident. An injury that was more serious than he first thought. 4 screws and a bone graft from his pelvis required to stabilise the break. But the recovery from surgery successful, and Vierque has only missed the test, returning straight back to action here. Michael Ruben Rinaldi in a change at Moto X Yamaha. Tito Rabat released. Rabat scoring only 3 points compared to rookie teammate Bahatin Sofoglu's 9, and Rinaldi's gamble on a switch to Supersport was unsuccessful. Only one top 10 finish in 10 races, no points at the last 2 rounds. So Rinaldi returning to the Superbike class, where he is a 5-time race winner and a veteran of over 200 race starts. This will be his first appearance with a manufacturer other than Ducati.
Yeah, and at least for him, it's a place where he's had a lot of success. Podiums, couple of race wins as well. But for Michael, it's obviously a very different shift now to move on to this package.
First sector times coming in. It is worth mentioning that there is a new qualifying tyre from Pirelli this weekend, giving extra grip and also extra longevity. That'll be worth keeping an eye on in the Superpole race, but might give riders a chance to put in 2 hot laps on the Q tyre.
Toprak, a little bit off the pace we saw from him in this morning session on this first flying lap, but it's going to be right down towards those mid-32s, so a 32, 4, 5 right from the get-go. That's a good lap time to throw in for Toprak.
Toprak Razgatlioglu coming through for his first flying lap. It's a 1:32.754 from him. Michael van der Mark following him around on track 0.6 of a second slower, a 1:33.391 for van der Mark.
Toprak, 1/10 of a second slower than his fastest time of the weekend so far. But you'd expect now to his second lap that he should be able to push on. Seems that with the Q tyre here this weekend, you should be able to get a couple of fast times in.
Yes, Toprak Razgatlioglu then leading the way. Nicolo Bulliger's only just completed his first sector. Danilo Petrucci likewise.
Yeah, and Toprak's a little bit off the pace in that first sector. You can see the yellow flags are out. That's for a crash for Ryan Vickers at turn 4. That's cost Toprak his second lap.
Yeah, wonder whether it will cost Nicolo Bulliger or whether he was already clear of that opening sector, because he's 0.3 of a second up after sector 2. Nicolo Bulliger, last year's Superpole Award winner and the current leader of the Superpole Award again in 2025, has never been out of the top 2 in qualifying this season. Certainly the man to beat here. Axel Bassani, super effort from him. 0.02 of a second faster than Toprak Razgatlioglu to go provisional pole. As we have 10.5 minutes remaining here. Nicolo Bulliger coming through the final sector then. He's almost half a second up on Axel Bassani's provisional P1 time. Exiting the final turn then for Nicolo Bulliger, and we should be in for a new lap record here. Bulliger crosses the line, and it's a 1:32.109. It's more than 0.2 of a second faster than Toprak Razgatlioglu's pole lap from a year ago.
Yeah, and close already down to those 31s. As I said earlier, don't be surprised if we see 31s. But for Petrucci, he's just moved up to 4th fastest ahead of Sam Lowes, and Andrea Iannone's put in a good lap as well. 32.9 for Iannone. And that's going to put him in the ballpark. Superpole
absolutely key to Petrucci's hopes of a top 3 finish in the championship, because he qualified down the order in Cremona, but otherwise has been a consistent qualifier this season, and neither of his direct rivals, Bautista or Locatelli, have qualified on the front row this season so far. Petrucci's done so twice, including last time out in Most. At the moment, Alvaro Bautista down in 10th position, and Andrea Locatelli directly behind him in 11th, so both hoping to improve on their second flying laps here. Locatelli ahead of Bautista on the track, was P11 in Superpole last time out in Moss. The first time, actually, that he's qualified out of the top 10 since here in Misano back in 2023. He is generally a consistent qualifier, Andrea Locatelli. P6 on the grid here in Misano last year. He moves up to P9 with his second flying lap. Now, how about Alvaro Bautista? He's making his way through the final sector. Not good at the moment for Bautista, who has statistically had his best circuit for Superpole results here in Misano, an average 4th in his 5 visits with 2 poles. He was 5th on the grid here last year. It's only 11th after his first 2 flying laps here in Superpole. Yeah, you can see there for Petrucci, and it looked like it was Iannone and maybe Bautista coming back into the pits there, but it was definitely Iannone, and it was Bulliger in front of him. And for Petrucci, he felt he was boxed through turns 15 and 16. Danilo's never afraid to be very vocal on the track with his body language, and we saw that at Cremona. And we've seen it again here in this instance. This is where he should have just come straight into the pits as well, because he's been held up through 15, knows the lap's gone, and he's on an in-lap now. But for Danilo, he has to wait another couple of minutes till he gets back to the pits now. Yes, he should still have plenty of time for 2 laps and another stint later on. 8 minutes still to go in Superpole. Iker Lecuona's just put in a new personal best, but it's only down in P13 for him. Let's run you through the standings then. It's Bulliger, Bassani, Razgatlioglu on the front row, Petrucci, Sam Lowes and Iannone on the second row as things stand. This is Remy Gardner just making his way through the final sector. It's going to be his first flying lap here. and could move him up onto the second row of the grid, at very least the third. No, Gardner loses ground in the second half of the lap, and it's only 11th position for Remy Gardner. Still good enough to bump Alvaro Bautista down to 12th.
Yeah, only 0.03 of a second though between Locatelli, Aguilar and Gardner as well in 9th, 10th and 11th. Jonathan Rea round about 0.2 of a second off of the other Yamahas. So the Yamahas look like that's what the package can do right now. So we'll see if Johnny's able to do something on his next stint.
Ika Lecuona continuing on, but he's off the pace on this lap, so he's not going to improve. Vast majority of the riders back in the pits now. 7 minutes to go. The first stint completed. It's Nicolo Bulliga leading by 0.6 of a second over Axel Bassani and Toprak Razgatlioglu, but we know that Razgatlioglu has more pace to find.
Yeah, definitely. We saw Toprak on that first lap, just not quite able to get the most from it. He was probably building into that second lap, and then obviously the yellow flags came out. But that's why it's so important to get your lap times in straight away, because you never know what's going to happen. You think back to Portimao, Alex Lowe's a really good example of what happened over that weekend. He had good speed and ended up with a crash in the Superpole session and yellow flag infringements as well. It was just always working against him. This is Petrucci coming up on Iannone and Bulliga, and you can see there for Danilo just getting himself angry about that one, and he'll obviously feel that he's been impeded there by Iannone. Iannone looked like he was a bit more of a distraction rather than really cruising through the apex there, but he has to go somewhere as well. He's coming into the pits. If he goes to the outside of the track and sweeps across, he's putting himself in a dangerous position as well. So it swings and roundabouts there, really.
The big question is, was Bulliga clear enough to avoid being penalised for slow riding on the line? I think that's the key there, because he was ahead of Iannone. Iannone certainly more likely of the two, if any, is to suffer a penalty.
Yeah, and Aston repeat really as well, like we saw with Bassani and Bulliga. And it's one of those things in the Superpole session where you have 15 minutes to set your lap time. You have enough tyres to be able to do multiple stints. It's not like it used to be whenever you only had one Q tyre for the week.
Important now for Petrucci to collect his thoughts as we pick up his teammate Jari Montella just halfway around his installation lap, his second stint. It's been a great start to this weekend so far for Montella. Previous best Superpole performance was in Moss last time out, 7th place, and he came away with 2 8th place finishes in the 2 feature-length races. And Montella currently on the 3rd row of the grid. That would be another great result for him.
It's interesting there. Toprak's gone out in front of Van der Mark again, so he's not looking for his teammate to be in front of him on this lap. And obviously Toprak's had more performance than what we've seen from Mikey, but Bassani able to latch onto the back. Axel does a good job of finding the right riders to follow during a Superpole session. Yes,
and Bassani has every reason to be optimistic here in Misano. His best round of last season on the Kawasaki was around this venue. He looked strong in the recent test, and provisionally up on the second place on the grid. The problem is that the margins from second place down are so narrow. There are a lot of positions to be won and lost in the final 5 minutes here of Superpole.
Yeah, I said you were going to have to be in the 32s to be on the front 2 rows of the grid. I think that obviously with Montella 33.0 down towards the likes of Johnny Rea, Lecuona and 33.3, maybe even Van der Mark, because he's in this group, they could all get themselves down into the 32s. So it's really going to be tight. A 100th of a second, a 10th of a second is going to make a big difference to these riders.
Alex Lowe's just on the back of that group, looking over his shoulder to see how many riders are following in behind him. An opportunity here for Alex Lowe's, because the benchmark is his teammate up in P2. So there is an opportunity for Alex to climb further still. Sam Lowe's up and running with his flying lap, first of this final stint, along with Jari Montella.
Yeah, really good middle sector for Sam as well. Over a 10th of a second faster than Bulliga's current pole time. Bulliga was a little bit slower than Bautista in Sector 2 through the course of the weekend so far, but good effort by Sam. Faster again in Sector 3. That's where we have seen that Bulliga's been really good, and then Sector 4 as well. So this could be a really good lap from the number 14 coming in.
Sam Lowe's already a strong qualifier last year. He has made it the cornerstone of a successful step forward this season. 3rd in the Superpole award with 2 front row starts already to his name. Pole sitter at the Dutch round and 2nd on the grid in our last visit to Italy 6 weeks ago. And he's back into P2 provisionally here with the first flying lap of his second stint. To 1 minute 32.419. Jari Montella crossing the line before Sam Lowe's has done enough to move up into P5. So splitting Toprak Razgatlioglu and Danilo Petrucci on the 2nd row of the grid. Razgatlioglu making his way through Sector 2 is already a 10th of a second up.
Look at how it's already stretched out with Toprak in front of Bassani, and Gerloff's done a good job to get onto the back of Alex Lowe's as well, and 5 riders now all working together. It looked like maybe Lowe's sat up a little bit there coming through turn 8, and he looks like he's missed his spot in that group now, so
Yeah, Garrett Gerloff coming through in front of him, so this lap has gone away from Alex Lowe, but it's all about Toprak Razgatlioglu. 0.2 of a second now up on Nicolo Bulliger at the halfway mark on this flying lap. Remember, there was less than 1/10 of a second between Toprak Razgatlioglu and Nicolo Bulliger in Superpole last time out. Toprak taking what was his 20th World SBK pole. Alvaro Bautista down in 12th place at present. An opportunity to at least move on to the second row of the grid with this lap, though. He's 0.6 of a second down on Bulliger after 3 completed sectors, and he's done enough for P7. It's not what Bautista would have been hoping for in a Misano weekend where he's looked good thus far, but this is going to be provisional pole for Toprak Razgatlioglu, and he's the first rider into the 1:31s here in Misano. It's a 1:31.856, a quarter of a second faster than Nicolo Bulliger, and that yields a smile from his crew chief Phil Marin back in the BMW pit box.
I couldn't help but react to that. That's a half a second under the lap record from last year, and for Razgatlioglu, that's a super lap. But let's see what Bulliger can do. Halfway around the lap, he's up by 1/10 of a second.
Razgatlioglu will go for another lap, but he's 1/10 down after sector 1. Razgatlioglu then leads the way. 1:31.856 is the target time. This is Andrea Locatelli, currently in 10th position. He does enough to move up into P5, but as for the battle for pole between Razgatlioglu and Bulliger, it's over to Nicolo Bulliger now to put in an effort to try and close down on that P1. Axel Bassani, third fastest, remember, half a second down on Razgatlioglu. Then it's Sam Lowe's, Andrea Locatelli and Jari Montella. Third row of the grid, Petrucci, Bautista, Iannone. What a power-packed third row that is. Petrucci and Iannone both on improved laps here. Petrucci moves in front of his teammate Montella for 6th place. Locatelli successfully defending P5. Nicolo Bulliger across the line, a 1:31.618. 0.2 of a second faster than Toprak Razgatlioglu, and another new lap record in Superpole with just a minute to go.
That is ridiculous there from Bulliger. 31.6, that's a super lap, but you can see Iannone was able to get tagging onto the back of him up onto that second row of the grid as well.
Remy Gardner never out of the top 10 in Superpole this season so far. Looks set to extend that run. It's P5 for Gardner, and that draws the applause of the GRT, a Yamaha pit box. He will be relegated by Alex Lowe's on his final lap. Moves up into P5. 30 seconds to go. Bulliger, Razgatlioglu, Bassani, Sam Lowe's, Alex Lowe's, and Remy Gardner. Third row of the grid, Iannone and Locatelli have both had this lap deleted, so they're not going to improve this time around. And Danilo Petrucci also 0.6 of a second down behind, so it doesn't look as though there's any improvement for those riders. Xavi Vierge making his return from injury this weekend, remember, down in 18th place at the moment with his teammate Iker Lecuona in P12. It's going to have to be a very special final sector here for Xavi Vierge to make any improvement from his current position. 2 seconds down on Nicolo Bulliger. Well, he's done just enough to pip Scott Redding, and another miserable start to the weekend for Redding, who is relegated down into 18th place. But it's not going to affect your leaders. Bulliger, Razgatlioglu and Axel Bassani, your top 3, and a bit of a surprise there, particularly in the third man. A brilliant display from Bassani, and his first front row start since Imola 2023.
Yeah, he picked the right rider to follow and was able to set his time, but you've still got to set the lap time, and 32.3 for Bassani, only a couple of hundredths of a second off the lap record coming into the session as well, so that's a really good lap from him. Good to be able to see Alex Lowe's up there as well, so the Bermuda's working really well. Both those riders within 1/10 of a second of each other, 3rd and 5th on the grid. I think Bermuda are going to be really pleased with that one.
Yeah, much as it worked well in the recent test here, and both riders were buoyant about the possibility of maybe even being able to challenge on podium pace, and with the right grid position, that makes it much more of a possibility. You think back to Alex Lowe's performances. He has had a 4th place in race 1 in Most, and when he qualified in 4th place, he was able to hold on to it. So there is an opportunity there for Bermuda to at least be in the reckoning, particularly if other riders get into trouble in that podium scrap.
Yeah, exactly. You can see there for Bulliger, those 0.7 of a second faster than the lap record coming into this session. And obviously we've got new tyre this weekend, which is going to play into that, but that is still a ridiculous performance from both himself and Toprak up there at the top of the times.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right to highlight the new qualifying tyre, and yet the pace just in free practice 3 this morning was already close, and that was without using the Q tyre. So there is a big step in performance, and particularly from Bulliger, and from Bulliger this season has made a massive step forward, certainly compared to when we visited Misano this time last year.
Yeah, and for Toprak and for Bulliger, they didn't use the Q tyre during the course of today's FP3 session, it looked like, but Bulliger seemed to put one in yesterday as well, so he had a bit of experience coming into this session, but they've been able to find it when it mattered in the Superpole session. The same could be said for Remy Gardner. You can see that at number 87. He came across the line and he was celebrating that like it was a pole, because he knew he got absolutely everything he could out of that Yamaha. Second row of the grid's good effort by him.
Yes, P12 in the championship, Remy Gardner, P8 on average in Superpole, so P6, a place on the second row of the grid for the second time in 2 rounds, because last time out as well in Most he was P6, and Remy Gardner posted one of only 2 front row starts in World SBK here last season, so we know he goes well in Misano, but great way to bounce back from what was a challenging FP2 session yesterday afternoon for Gardner. Yeah,
big high-speed crash at the end of the session through turn 12 and 13, so for Remy, he's bounced back really well from that, and good effort by him, leading Yamaha by a tenth of a second or half a tenth from Locatelli, so really good job there from Remy.
Yeah, bad news for the trailing Yamaha of Jonathan Ray. Remember, pole sitter at the 2019 and 2021 Emilia-Romagna rounds, only qualified P15 here last season. He's qualified even worse than that this time around, down in P16, Jonathan Ray.
Yeah, and for Johnny, obviously he could well stay at Yamaha for next season, but he is looking elsewhere. And this kind of performance is why, because we know how good he is in a qualifying situation, but he's not able to do that with the Yamaha.
Good to see from the promoter, and for Alex Lowe's, 4th last time on the grid, 5th this time. So finding a little bit of consistency as they get to grips with that package.
Yeah, and I think as well for Alex, we obviously saw on that first flying lap at the end of that session that he dropped back from the group, so he missed out on being able to use the riders around him, but still was able to set a fast lap time on his own, so he's going to feel pretty comfortable and confident going into the race. Obviously, the Bimota on the front row for Axel Bassani here, it works better in the hot conditions than what the Kawasaki used to, so that's going to help them a little bit today.
Top 3 making their way in down victory lane, but I can tell you that both Nicolo Bulliger and Andrea Iannone are under investigation for slow riding during Superpole, so the stewards are looking at that, and that could yet demote Nicolo Bulliger. He'll still score the points and finish top in terms of the Superpole award, but you could be looking at a grid penalty for race 1 at very least later on this afternoon.
Yeah, and it could be that 3-place grid penalty, dropping Bulliger back down onto the second row of the grid, but we'll wait and see what happens for him there. And for Nico, as it is, obviously a really good lap. That's going to give him a lot of confidence going into the race regardless.
Yes, Nicolo Bulliger again continuing his strong run of performances in Superpole this season. Our pole sitter at the Australian round and the Italian round. Now tops the timesheets at the Emilia-Romagna round as well. Hasn't been out of the top 2 in Superpole this season. We're just going to see this incident again in the latter stages for Danilo Petrucci, following directly behind the yellow Go 11 bike of Andrea Iannone. Iannone does peel off to the inside line and Bulliger's further clear, but we have seen penalties for that, exactly that type of situation, even if it's a soft one.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the race steward that has to make that decision, because looking at what we have there, I think it'd be very harsh.
But it wouldn't be the first time we've had a harsh one like that.
We also have a precedent set for it in the past, and obviously the riding standards set in the Superbike class filter down into the other classes, and sometimes they do look to make a bit of an example of a Superbike rider as well.
Yeah, I do completely agree with you that it would be a tough penalty, particularly on Bulliger at the front of that.
I think if we don't see that reaction from Petrucci, you don't think anything of it.
Yeah. Completely agree, but that's part of the game as well. Petrucci is doing what he needs to do. He's qualified down in P9, so there's a potential for him to get a spot off Iannone there on the grid for race 1 later on this afternoon. But Petrucci's going to feel it affected him. But as you said in that moment, more than likely, if he was affected, it was only distraction rather than actual, the track position being taken at the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those situations that it's easily done whenever you end up in that sort of situation, but we'll wait and see what the stewards have to say. As it is right now, you just have to celebrate the lap there that you get from Nicolo Bulliger.
So Nicolo Bulliger P1 ahead of Toprak Razgatlioglu and Axel Bassani. We'll hear from your top trio in a couple of moments' time. Big question now about your battle for 3rd position, because Alvaro Bautista